Hey Health Science 1 classes, Mrs. Combs here. This video is just giving you a rundown of the bones that we need to be aware of, their name and their location for Health Science 1. This is part 1 of a 2-part video series. We are going to first cover the axial skeleton. From class, we are aware that the axial skeleton contains the bones of the skull, the vertebral column, and the thorax. So we're going to go over the bones that you need to be aware of today. First, looking at the skull, the bones within the skull that you need to be aware of for this class are the parietal bone. And the parietal bone is on the side here, right up top that region. There are actually 2 parietal bones, one on either side, divided by this suture here. The next bone we need to be aware of is the frontal bone, and that is the large bone on the front of the skull, the frontal bone. The occipital bone is the large bone that is on the back of the skull. The temporal bones, again, there are 2 of these. They are on either side of the skull. For a reference point, they're right around where our ear is. Bones within the face that we need to be aware of are nasal bone. It's right here. Our zygomatic arch. This bone here is the zygomatic bone, and this area is the zygomatic arch. You have one on either side. The mandible, you've heard it called the jawbone before. This is the mandible. And the maxilla is the top half where our upper lip is. Those are the bones of the skull that we need to be aware of. Moving on to bones of the spinal column that we need to know for this class. The first 7 vertebrae are known as the cervical vertebrae, our neck. The next 12 vertebrae that you count are our thoracic vertebrae. These are easy to find on a picture because those are the ones that are going to be attached to the ribs. The next 5 in through here are known as our lumbar vertebrae, commonly referred to as our low back. There are 5 fused vertebrae in through here, collectively known as the sacrum. So this whole area is the sacrum. Viewed from the front, this area is the sacrum. It helps to make up the posterior of our pelvic girdle. And then these 4 fused bones on the bottom are collectively known as our coccyx, commonly known as your tailbone. Moving on to the thorax, we'll turn our skeleton to the front here. This in the front is the sternum. It can be broken down into 3 parts. The top part here is known as the manubrium. The middle part, the bulk of that sternum, is known as the body of the sternum. And this protuberance on the end is known as the xiphoid process. Looking at our ribs, we have 12 pairs of ribs. The first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are known as our true ribs. Ribs 8, 9, and 10 are known as our false ribs. The difference between the true ribs and the false ribs are that the true ribs attach directly to the sternum by way of cartilage, whereas ribs 8, 9, 10, the false ribs, their cartilage has to attach to the cartilage of rib number 7 in order to reach the sternum. Finally, we have our floating ribs. They can actually best be seen from the back, and those are ribs 11 and 12. They are known as the floating ribs because they do not have a cartilaginous attachment to the sternum. Those are the bones that we need to be aware of for the axial skeleton.